So, folks, there is a show online called Breaking Points, and it is hosted by Crystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti. Now, Crystal Ball has historically been left-leaning. Saagar Enjeti is historically extraordinarily conservative-leaning. In fact, I would describe him as I have described him in the past as a crypto-fascist. You know, someone who is a fascist but is being cagey about it. You know, like if you go to a Nazi forum a lot, or you know, encounter someone with like a swastika in their bio or something, and you ask them what their political ideology is, they'll tell you like they're a moderate conservative. You know, he gets real cagey about some of his political opinions. He hides his power level in the parlance of the internet. And so you have Crystal Ball, and she is, you know, she had a reputation several years ago for being like a decent leftist rhetorically, but when it came to having a dynamic with her co-host, who again I would describe as a crypto-fascist, there were times where Saagar Enjeti would just kind of walk away with the point, or be able to inject a pretty fascist talking point into a conversation with little to no pushback. And, well, I decided we should maybe take a look at this particular debate. It's about 26 minutes long, and it is titled Crystal and Saagar Debate Trump Dictator Behavior. Now, I have been paying attention to politics for a bit now, and I can tell you, Donald Trump has a lot of dictator behavior, whatever that means. And so it'll be fun to kind of dig into this, because I have a feeling Saagar Enjeti is going to be wrong about a lot of things. I've seen a couple small clips from this debate. I haven't not watched the whole thing, but something tells me that Saagar Enjeti is going to go a bit mask off here and bite off a bit more than he can actually justify. So, let's dive in, shall we?
All right. Well, speaking of interviews given by Trump, Maria Bartiromo, and again, credit to her, asked him some challenging questions in his recent interview with her. And Trump's probably most eyebrow-raising comments came when he was asked about, Election Day. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Let's remember, you've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country in the last couple of years. Yeah. You have people on the terrorist watch list, 350 in the last couple of years. You got, like you said, 13,000 murderers and 15,000 rapists. Right. What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful election day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think...
Ironically here, just ironically, tangentially, let's see. Here we go. This story broke earlier today. Trump, who brags about his stamina, is ducking interviews because he's exhausted. Trump's team has used exhaustion as an excuse for canceling interviews down the home stretch of the campaign, Politico reports. Like, it's Trump, however, whose public appearances have been increasingly incoherent as the race has intensified, which, by the way, we've seen. Like, a few days ago, he took the stage and stood there, like, weirdly kind of dancing for like 40 minutes to just random music without saying a word. Again, in any other election cycle, that would completely torpedo a campaign. But for Donald Trump, a lot of his supporters just give him a pass. They think he's playing brilliant 5D chess here. Why are Dems not shouting this from the rooftops? I mean, I would guess that this story is probably going to proliferate down Democratic ranks in like the next day or two, because this is just shocking. But the former president has also canceled several interviews and public appearances, including a CNBC interview, an NBC interview, a speaking slot at an NRA event in Georgia, a high-profile interview with 60 Minutes. He refused to debate Harris a second time. Like, yeah. Politico reported on Friday that Trump's team told The Shade Room, a podcast popular with young black listeners.
Trump's shade match is really giving white girl with Maybelline Dream Matte Mousse circa 2008.
Yeah. He looks like he put on makeup to try and blend in with the beige walls behind him. And it is really bad. Young black listeners that the campaign had been talking to for weeks about setting up an interview before backing out. That Trump was exhausted and refusing some interviews, but that could change. Politico adds that the campaign offered up Trump-loving rapper Waka Flocka Flame as a replacement. We live in clown world. Jesus Christ. All right. Anyway, he's a very tired boy, guys. Not beige, he's orange as fuck. Look, he just, all I'm trying to say is he blends into the background of this. He looks like a wooden statue.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think
yeah, exactly. Dragonfly, like this puts him in such a position to be dunked on by Harris. It's incredible. Like, it's an incredible display of weakness right before the election. And it's honestly a gift to Democrats. Like, if he is too tired to campaign, he is going to be too tired to be the president. You know?
the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some
I wanted to talk about this, but like, dude, listen to this quote.
of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
The radical.
Yeah, so that exact quote right there is him calling for the army to be used against his political opponents. What he's talking about there is, if there is a protest, deploying the army or the National Guard to treat them as enemies of the state. Okay? He's talking about doing a fascist takeover and creating essentially his own army that is at his beck and call. These are Nazi talking points. This is what like Nazis in America like fantasize about nonstop. Having a strongman who is willing to essentially deploy force against the American people. This is not Nazi. It is absolutely Nazi. Like, if you ask American Nazis what kind of policy they would love to see, they will tell you, yeah, we want the right guy in charge with essentially militarized capabilities that he can turn on the American people. He wants a secret police force. He wants to weaponize and utilize the Border Patrol, which can operate essentially anywhere within the United States borders. There is technically like a limit to how far from a border or port of entry that they can serve, but it basically covers the entire United States. Donald Trump is talking about creating that system and then rounding up like 20, 30 million people into concentration camps. Like, and getting rid of the undesirables of society. He is exactly what American Nazis have been waiting for the last 100 years. Nazi meant genocide, mass murder. Trump was president before and did not do that. I've got bad news for you. Okay? Sometimes bad things happen later and not earlier. Donald Trump came into power and he's a big dumb idiot. And so we had checks and balances that accounted to some extent for big dumb idiots. Him being in power before did not eliminate his desire to do a fascist coup of America. He attempted to do it in 2020 or 2021, whatever year January 6th happened. My brain's a bit fuzzy at the moment. But, like, he attempted to do a fascist coup of America. He also attempted, if you will remember, to deploy the army against BLM protesters. But it turned out people in his administration, notably people who are no longer serving in the US government, told him, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's illegal. And if you'll notice, the Supreme Court recently handed the President of the United States basically complete immunity to do whatever the President of the United States wants to do without any legal repercussions, as long as he's doing it ostensibly in the name of his office. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there are no guardrails for this time around. The people he put into the Supreme Court changed the law in America to enable him to have a fascist dictatorship if he so chooses, and he's going around saying, I want to make a fascist dictatorship. He did not attempt the coup. He did try to deploy. He did attempt the coup. That was the entire premise of his conspiracy. His conspiracy was to submit fake electors and then to assemble a large crowd to intimidate Congress into agreeing with these fake elector slates, thereby seizing control of the US government. That was the plan. He didn't accidentally summon a crowd of people chanting to hang Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence on the day that the election was certified. That wasn't an accident. That was premeditated, and that was planned. It's not an accident that many of those people brought guns. It's not an accident that some of those people brought bombs. These are people who have been convicted in courts of law for doing these things. It's not an accident that he had leadership and large contingents of various far-right conservative militia groups present on that day who were instrumental in breaking into the Capitol complex. Do I need to remind you guys that on January 6th, that mob of people who was chanting to hang the Vice President of the United States came within spitting distance of members of Congress? The only reason the mob did not actually get their hands on members of Congress was because one police officer redirected the flow of the crowd down one stairwell instead of into a hallway, which would have given them a clear view of members of Congress who were fleeing from the Capitol complex. There is no world in which this wasn't planned. He told them to fight like hell. He spent hours at the rally pumping people up, telling them that if they didn't fight, they would lose their democracy. And he's not talking about fighting at the ballot box because the election already happened. So, leaves you with some pretty limited options for how you're supposed to fight after an election has already happened. There's so much you are saying I want to talk about this, but no, he asked for peaceful and he had no idea. If you believe that, you are one of the biggest dipshits to ever walk the earth. I'm sorry. Like, if you genuinely believe, like, he was an innocent actor in all of this and, like, he just whoopsie-doodled into a violent mob attacking the Capitol of Congress, you are one of the biggest fools and the biggest suckers. You would be first in line to buy an air guitar. Okay, you are truly shimp-brained. You know, like, just you need to be a little bit sharper. Okay. You need to be a little bit more introspective on this issue, because this guy, the world's most obvious con man, is taking you for a ride. He didn't deploy the National Guard for hours after they had breached the Capitol building. I'm here right now. Yeah, and you're not being very intelligent about it. Anyway.
Left enemy from within should be handled by the National Guard or, if necessary, the military.
Oh, yeah, but this guy who's saying he wants to use the National Guard and the army against his political opponents, he would never do a fascist coup. He's just an innocent buffoon in all of this. Ignore all of the media appearances where he's directly looked into the camera and said, I will be a dictator on day one, or I will deploy the National Guard and the army against my political enemies, or where he's talked about wanting to round up millions of people, tens of millions of people who are your friends and your neighbors and your family members, and put them into concentration camps to deport them, separating them from their families. Okay, but he's just an innocent buffoon. He could never manage something like that. Don't believe what he's saying. Like, imagine believing so strongly in the institutions of the American government that we have seen buckle and break year after year, that you think that Donald Trump doesn't mean any of that, and even if he does, our institutions are strong enough to not listen to him. You are a fool.
I mean,
if you believe that.
I want to say that before the last election, I downplayed the possibility of like what ended up unfolding with January 6th.
Was told Pelosi denied it. Denied what? What did Nancy Pelosi deny? She had a guy break into her home and almost kill her husband. A guy who believes in Donald Trump being like a new savior for conservatism. Like, are you really this dense?
And how far they went with the fake elector slates, et cetera. And I always kind of like cringe to talk about concerns about democracy, but like, this is outrageous.
Yeah, he denied the National Guard on January 6th on video. He could have deployed them hours earlier.
Thing for him to say. And it is scary, although this time, you know, he's not in control of the federal government, so he doesn't have control of the military, so that's a good thing. But, you know, you and I both think that the most likely outcome is that this election is very, very close. And when I hear comments like this from him, I find it deeply unsettling at what the country could be in for if it is another, once again, razor-thin election. And we all know he's not going to just like nicely concede.
Look, I get it. I guess I would put myself in this camp.
Like, wait, I'm sorry. You're saying Pelosi denied the National Guard on January 6th? Do you know what powers the Speaker of the House has over the National Guard? Do you know what powers the Speaker of the House has over the National Guard? Just out of curiosity. I don't know anything. I just know what I watched. Well, here's a little bit of information for you. Nancy Pelosi, and as the Speaker of the House, one of the most powerful people in Congress at the time, had exactly zero control over the National Guard. The Speaker of the House does not direct or summon the National Guard. That's not a power she has. Okay? Also, she is on the record.
Not trying to interrupt right now. Just wanted to knock out a white name friendo.
She is
BWA.
She is on the record. Along with, by the way, the Senate Majority Leader jointly called for military assistance during the January 6th insurrection. So, again, she called for military assistance. She did that. But you know what? She has zero control over the military. She has zero control over the National Guard. That control falls to someone named Donald J. Trump when he's the president, actually. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know what was or wasn't on camera. Okay? But I need to tell you, if it was on camera that she didn't want the National Guard or whatever, gotta tell you something, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It is completely and utterly irrelevant. If the point of you bringing this up is that, oh, she didn't call for military aid, she did. If the point of this comment is, what other point is there? She can't control the National Guard. So what's the point? Okay, you saw that. How is that as relevant as you trying to say that you saw a purple hippo in your neighborhood? Why is it relevant? If she has no control over the military, no control over the National Guard, and she actually did make calls for military assistance, how is it relevant? Yo, what? They saw Mudang? They saw his coming. The decision on whether to call the National Guard troops to the Capitol is made by what is known as the Capitol Police Board, which is made up of the House Sergeant at Arms, the Senate Sergeant at Arms, and the Architect of the Capitol. The board decided not to call the Guard ahead of the insurrection, but did eventually request assistance after the rioting had already begun, and the troops arrived several hours later. The House Sergeant at Arms reports to Pelosi, and the House Sergeant at Arms, the Senate Sergeant at Arms reports to the Senate Majority Leader. So again, they did call for this. So I Subcommittee on Oversight did an investigation into this. I don't care. There are lots of biologists who do investigations into hippos. It's not relevant. Like, why are you bringing it up? Maybe you don't have the latest info? Richard Dunhill III. What aren't you understanding about that not being relevant to anything? What are you not understanding about what is unclear to you about Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the authority to call the National Guard? What about that sentence is unclear to you? There was no insurrection. It's fucked up to say so. Eeyore explores, you are one of the dumbest people alive. And every single time you enter my chat, you really, really need to set the bar lower and lower and lower for yourself. It's really, it's awe-inspiring. I'm done. I'm done with this this chuckle fuck. You've done more research than the subcommittee. Richard Dunhill, do you know what functions the Speaker of the House has? Do you know basics about how our government works? Did you take high school civics? Because what I'm trying to tell you is it doesn't matter what the subcommittee says, because the Speaker of the House cannot assemble the National Guard. The Speaker of the House is not an authority over the National Guard or of the Army. So what Nancy Pelosi said or didn't say about the National Guard on camera is irrelevant because she has no control over it either way. Whatever she said, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. They literally found the Pentagon guilty of this. Guilty of what? Because I need to point something else out to you. Nancy Pelosi also doesn't control the fucking Pentagon. So you're just Oh, did you know that on Alpha Centauri they have purple unicorns? Did you know? Hey, did you know that in the fantasy world, A Song of Ice and Fire, they worship multiple deities, but you don't really see them directly in the book until one part in chapter 6 in The Winds of Winter. It's coming. It's coming soon, baby. Like that irrelevant data. Did you know that there are different species bonuses in D&D now? Irrelevant. It's the latest info. It doesn't matter. What are you not understanding? What is the disconnect here? What is the disconnect here between you not understanding that you are just citing irrelevant facts? Did you know the Apple logo is an apple? That has about as much relevance as what you just brought up. It's not my research. Do you not understand? Chat, am I not Richard Dunhill? Do you understand what the word irrelevant means? And from this point on, I need you to just directly answer my questions. Do you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant? And if the things I see you posting in chat are not direct answers to my questions, you're just going to be banned. Do you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant? So direct answer, yes or no. Do you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant? If you type anything other than yes or no into my chat, you're banned. Do you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant?
Thank you for the.
Yes, but this isn't that. Okay, so you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant. Do you understand when I say Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the authority to control the National Guard? Is there anything unclear in that statement? Yes or no? Yes, I get it. Okay, so if you get it, why are you presenting me with irrelevant data? If she has no control over this, why do you think it matters? Yeah, subcommittees exist, but why do you think it matters if if you accepting that Nancy Pelosi does not control the National Guard? Why is whatever she says about the National Guard relevant in this case? No, I haven't moved on. I'm controlling this conversation. It's my show. Answer the question. Why are you talking about that? We're talking about Nancy Pelosi. Why are you bringing up a subcommittee's findings on what Nancy Pelosi said about the National Guard? If you know that it is irrelevant to the National Guard being deployed. Nancy Pelosi controls the National Guard is really funny. I agree. I'm just frustrated. look it up. It's not my data. But why would I care about the data if it's irrelevant to the point? This has been, again, if you understand what it means for something to be irrelevant, and you understand that the data you may have falls into the category of being irrelevant to what Nancy Pelosi said, or what she said being irrelevant falls into that category, why do you care about this subcommittee? How is that relevant? I understand what data is. Do you understand how just saying, well, a subcommittee found that Nancy Pelosi didn't call the National Guard to the Capitol on January 6th? Do you understand how that's irrelevant? Isn't the fact that Trump called in the National Guard important? Yeah, but do you understand that you brought up Nancy Pelosi not calling in the National Guard? And that's why we've been stuck on this point for the last, 5 or 10 minutes? Where is the disconnect here, man? I'm speculating that she was the admin they referenced since she said she was on camera admitting it. Why are you talking about data then? Why the fuck are you talking about data when you then describe what you're doing as speculation? I am going to move on because you are too dumb for me to use my time on this earth to continue talking with. But you're very special, and you should seek to be maybe a little bit less special in this particular mental category. All right, moving on. Wow, we've made it a whopping 2 minutes into this video already, and people are already being some of the softest brained babies I've ever seen in my life.
Let's put the New York Times piece up on the screen because I actually think this is a good psychological analysis. It's the Trump voters who don't believe Trump. It says, when the former president endorses violence and proposes using government to attack his enemies, many supporters assume it's just an act. The former president has talked about weaponizing the Justice Department. What we just talked about with with everything. You go, there is of course evidence to the contrary, they say, for the people who don't believe him. But one of the ways that voters think another term might go, it's how they rationalize his rhetoric by affording him a reverse benefit of the doubt. They doubt and he benefits. So last Thursday, this reporter from the New York Times, Sean McCreesh, who by the way is a very good reporter, he just went through and he talked to several of these people. And a lot of them were like, look, I think that the media blows this stuff out of proportion for sensationalism. They're like, I don't believe that he would actually do it. Sipped his iced tea, says, I don't. So what? And then they're like, well, why is he saying he wants to do it? They go, it could just be for publicity. He's just riling up the news. I do think there's probably some element to this. But, I recently was asked on a podcast, like, are you really worried about the aftermath of the election? I actually think things are more likely to go better this time than last time. A lot of the uncertainty is gone. So, for example, the Electoral Count Act now does not even allow for whatever that whole vice president situation to happen for certification. In terms of everyone was worried about the false elector scheme, now the Electoral Count Act has it so that the governors of those states are the ones who declare for certification. 5 out of the 7 swing states have Democratic governors. One of them, who's a Republican, is Brian Kemp, who stood up to Trump on. So all of the processes through which you would see some sort of January 6th style thing, it can't really happen again. Now, that doesn't mean violence and riling, all that couldn't happen. But the actual stuff that you want to hang on to, it's not there. Same if you look at, power of the government. I mean, last time around, Trump's own Attorney General, Bill Barr, said that it was bullshit. He literally said,
imagine how bad your reality would get crushed if you couldn't blame Trump for January 6th. Your reaction makes sense. Honestly, I'm open to new data. The issue is I've seen the data. I covered the event live as it happened. And Donald Trump absolutely caused this to happen. like, the idea here that, like, oh, it wasn't Donald Trump's fault that a bunch of his followers arrived on that day with the express purpose of shifting the electoral results. Like, it's not an accident that happened. It's not like some weird conspiracy that, like, other people put into motion here. He appeared at the event and encouraged his followers to do what they did. And if you don't think that, you just lack the media literacy to understand pretty plain English.
Said I'm just quoting him. He said this is bullshit and wrote a whole book about it. Talked about how he wouldn't execute his orders. Trump is not in power this time around. Like, a lot of the levers that they tried to grasp for, look, they can go to the legal system again, go for it. I mean, you got shot down on every single case last time around. I guess I'm just not as worried. Another thing is how can you be a Trump supporter and have you watch these January 6 people all locked up in prison for years or held in the DC county jail with the feds crawling so far in their lives that they're like bankrupt from legal fees, and think that you would want to participate in this again? Or how would you want to be one of his lawyers to try and help execute this when every single one of those people ends up pleading guilty in a court of law? Like, all of the incentive structure for a J6 2.0, I don't see it as existing. And look, that's just cope, maybe on my behalf, but I'm just like, I don't see how it can happen again.
I mean, in certain respects, yes. Yeah. Because, like I said, he doesn't control the federal government.
He literally is
That's the main difference. Yeah. That doesn't mean there isn't a lot of trouble that he could cause. And, you know, I understand, too, why people, the people they interviewed at the New York Times say, I don't really take him seriously. Like, he chanted lock her up, and then he didn't lock her up, and all of that. But he did incite January 6th, and he did go.
Yep. Absolutely, 10,000%. If you disagree with this, you've drunk the Kool-Aid. You would follow Jim Jones straight to hell.
To great lengths to actually overturn the results of the election. I mean, that's just a fact. The fake elector slates that his own people were referring to as fake, being offered in different states, pressuring Mike Pence with everything he could to not certify the election, picking J.D. Vance, I think, as his vice president, primarily because J.D. Vance said, I would have done what Mike Pence wouldn't do last time around. And so, you have a man that his supporters really don't trust anyone but him. If he says this was rigged and stolen and, they're doing it again and take your country back and whatever, I don't want to underestimate, especially when he's out making comments like this and sort of setting things up for that. I don't want to underestimate what that could look like and what it could do for the country. I mean, I think you even acknowledged, like, oh, yeah, the possibility of violence is real. I'm not saying there's any guarantees here, but I do think because we're heading for such a razor-thin election, if he loses, I do think it could be another extraordinarily difficult and ugly time in...
One, I like her suit coat, and two, pretty spot on analysis here.
American politics. So that's all I'd say about that is, like, yeah, he didn't follow through on all of his talk, but you can't underestimate him when January 6th and the fake electors and all of that stuff really did happen. And of course, we also know how much of a freak out there would be if, like, Kamala Harris said something similar about calling out the National Guard and the U.S. military to deal with her political opponents, which is what he said. And by the way, they are seizing on these comments on the trail and talking about them.
Oh yeah, they're definitely, look, yeah. By the way, do I think it helps Trump? No. I mean, dude, it's like, yeah, let's talk about this whenever a bunch of people specifically rejected you and your style of stop the steal candidates all across all the swing states. So maybe that's a little bit of a problem. I wouldn't be talking this way. I don't see JD talking this way. He doesn't even bring up the election unless he's pressed on it 5 times in an interview. Maybe sounds smart to me, but look, it's Trump and he can decide what he wants to do. Look, first of all, if he wins, it's not an issue, right? So there you go. He'll take power, he's 2 termed out, and then it's over.
Yeah, except the Supreme Court's given him pretty much unlimited power to continue taking terms if he so chooses.
In terms of the loss...
Is democracy dead if Trump wins? I am of the belief that democracy is effectively dead if Trump wins. Yes.
All of the stuff that they could have that they tried to do last time is now either illegal, has been prosecuted, or the policy has changed. Can he try and incite you know, I wouldn't even say incite violence. Can he try and have rallies and all that? Yes, certainly. But
Will you send out Antifa if Trump wins? You know, Antifa isn't like a military force. It's just people who don't like fucking Nazis. Or just Nazis in general. Also, just as a reminder, a lot of the damage done during the BLM protests were done by outside agitators, like, I don't know, the Minneapolis police precinct. That was burned down by conservative counter-protesters. Really makes you think.
again, if you are so dumb, it's to go to a Trump rally protesting the election and then break into the Capitol, honestly, then you deserve to go to jail again because you literally watched what happened to the first time around. So there seems to be a lot of incentives in play here where, again, look, again, maybe I'm Pollyanna. People can roll this clip back on January 6th next year around, but I'm optimistic. I don't
Man,
think
we had a what is with this string of weird dipshits in YouTube? Strange.
it's going to be that bad.
So we also have Mike Flynn, who of course was a member of Trump's previous administration, forced out, resigned under some scandals, basically like caught being a foreign agent. He was asked a question about potentially not just draining the swamp, but executing the swamp, to great applause from the supporters in the room. Let's take a listen to how that went.
Is there any chance that should the election go in a positive result, you would get your rank reinstated and sit at the head of a military tribunal to not only drain the swamp, but imprison the swamp, and on a few occasions, execute the swamp?
Your sentiment is like a lot of people that I speak to around this country, and for years now, for the last 4 years of my life, I've been around this country, all over the country. I've been to over 100 cities just, doing my thing, which is basically telling the American people, you better wake up here, folks. There's no more, well, we're going to go through just another election. All these elections are the same. But what your sentiment is about is accountability, okay? Accountability. And these people are already up to no good. So we got to win first. We win, and then Katie bar the door, okay? Believe me, the gates of hell, my hell, will be unleashed.
Yeah, this group of people definitely not fascists, definitely not loved by Nazis, definitely just just very peace-loving people. Definitely not talking about political retribution should they take power. Also, again, Mike Flynn did go to prison for lying about Russian interference and working with Russian officials. He went to prison for lying to the FBI to cover for Donald Trump. And he was pardoned by Donald Trump, oddly enough, and whoa, weird. No checks and balances against that.
Look,
Your
again,
thoughts on that,
I think
Saagar?
people seize on this stuff. Mike Flynn has no connection to the campaign. He was fired after 33 days or whatever as a national security advisor. I believe I need to make sure exactly what happened here, but he either pled guilty or he had some situation with the foreign agent stuff that happened
The
at that
Turkish
time.
government?
Yeah, it was. I covered it so much at the time. It was something like
the thing is,
Gulen
though-
and Erdogan. He basically has made a career of like QAnon style adjacent like events and like bank.
He is an incredibly prominent figure in the Christian nationalist movement. Like, Mike Flynn is really well known to Trump's core base. Also, I thought I read something recently. Let's see. Not that. Yeah, also, if he has no connection with the Trump campaign, then it's very strange that he's talking about when he gets into office. Like, that's a very weird thing to talk about. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Girling himself since then. So I'm not worried about this. I don't think that Mike Flynn speaks with any authority whatsoever.
But is what he's saying that different
Yeah.
from what Trump has been saying? Because Trump is saying, like, I will be your retribution and calling out the National Guard and the military. I mean, it seems pretty consistent with the sentiments that Trump himself is expressing.
I mean, in terms of I will be your retribution, he said that last time around. And what did it look like? Mostly like hiring people like Mike Flynn. And it not.
Oh, also, in case any of you are wondering, hey, where was Mike Flynn talking? You know, I haven't heard about him for a while. What's he doing? He was talking at an event called Rod of Iron. Now, if you have never heard of Rod of Iron, you would be forgiven. It is this conference that occurs every year. But if you have heard of it, you would know that Rod of Iron is run by the Unification Church, the Church of Sun Myung Moon. Okay? And this is the gun cult you may have heard of in the past. They literally worship AR-15s as holy relics. Like, they believe God gave their church members the AR-15, and it is ordained by God for them to have it. And, yeah, they were pretty prominent and famous in, like, I think the 80s and 90s for mass marriage ceremonies where they would do arranged marriages within their church and everyone would get married at the same time. It is a cult, a pretty dangerous one too, and that's the event Mike Flynn was talking at. It is yeah, specifically the AR-15. I have a friend who was raised as a Moonie. Let's just say as soon as she turned 18, she got out. Yeah, not surprising. Talking about the Korean cult? Yep. So, anyway. Yeah, they're real normal.
Not working out so.
But they are also prominent and influential. So, you know, Saagar being like, oh, Mike Flynn will never amount to a thing. It's like, no, Donald Trump is very aware of him. Donald Trump pardoned him.
So well. To the extent that it would be nice is if, hey, we actually did fire a bunch of people inside the CIA and the FBI. I don't think that's so bad. I guess it's, it's about degrees, and it's about which and how you interpret like what that looks like and what's extreme or whatever's not. Like, to me, I think Schedule F is a great idea. I think more than half of these people should be fired. Is that what Mike Flynn is talking about? No. And that's another thing too, where if you have to point to his track record.
When you say the gates of hell are going to be unleashed, or I'll be arrested,
but he's not, has no connection to the campaign.
I'll call out the National Guard or the military should deal with my political opponents. That's not about Schedule F.
No, but he says this shit all the time. How much of it actually happened?
Again, the argument that the president of the United States is arguing and trying to influence the country towards fascistic policy positions or outright illegal policy positions is concerning just on the fact that he's advocating for those positions, even if you think he doesn't have the power to achieve it, because he's the president. What he says matters. If he becomes the president, what he says matters, ostensibly. And saying, oh, just ignore what he says. You can believe the good bits, but ignore whenever he says something that's inconvenient to him getting into power, is a pretty spineless position.
there when Trump was like, I'm going to take military funding and build the border wall, and then shut down the government for 3 weeks, and then caved to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. In practice, how does this shit actually work? Like, most of the time, it doesn't usually work out to his benefit. It turns out that there are decent...
Yeah, and now he is empowered by the Supreme Court, and he has a plan to gut any bureaucratic impasse that might occur and facilitate his entire agenda. They have a plan to put thousands of people into political positions, specifically so that he can rule via executive order. And you know what? If those go to court, he has a bunch of friendly people on the court.
And checks and balances in the American system. I mean, look, we could play the next part here, and this is probably more consequential. From J.D. Vance, when he was asked about who the most consequential part of the government will be, he said the Attorney General. Let's take a listen.
On the Attorney General, you said on Friday that the most important person in government in a Trump-Vance administration, other than the president, is not you. It would be the Attorney General. Why do you consider that the most important spot, the second most important spot?
Well, I can answer this before he even says a word. The reason he says the Attorney General is the second most important position in the Trump administration is because they intend to just battle everything up to the Supreme Court and effectively bypass Congress in this way. It's one of the ways that they can just circumvent Congress to get legislation done. It's just, you can get all the legislation you can dream of done if you redefine terms enough. Like that's what this is. That's what this is for. He's like, this is describing how you would streamline a fascist dictatorship in America.
Well, one reason, Martha, is just public opinion. And what I mean here is that we really want the American people to believe that we have a fair and equitable administration of justice. If not, the entire sort of system falls apart. You need people to believe that if the Attorney General prosecutes somebody, it's motivated by justice and law and not by politics. And
yeah, so that when we take power, no one thinks we're, making a dictator for political reasons. We're doing it because it's the just and right thing to do.
Fortunately,
would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? Would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? He suggested that in the past.
Martha, he was president for 4 years, and he didn't go after his political opponents. You know who did go after her political opponents? Kamala Harris, who has tried to arrest everything from pro-life activists.
Question for you: what's the rule to share links in Twitch chat? Unfortunately, you are not allowed to share. No one except for mods is allowed to share links in Twitch chat. So if you want to share links in Twitch chat, you have to post in Riverboat chat, largely because if you post a link to a bad spot in Riverboat chat, I can just IP ban and you can never have an account again. So as opposed to on Twitch chat, when I had, I had bad experiences opening up the chat to links in the past, mainly people posting links to gore, links to, white supremacist memes or dox information about me or my family. So unfortunately, we had to take that ability away from chatters in Twitch and I believe in YouTube. But if you would like to submit a link that you want posted in Twitch, you can either post it in the Riverboat chat or you can whisper it to a mod. Those are the two means of getting links posted.
To her political opponent.
He said those people who cheated will be prosecuted
as a weapon against people. Well, he said that people who violated our election laws will be prosecuted. I think that's the administration of law. He didn't say people are going to go to jail because they disagree with me. That has, in fact, been the administration and the policy of Kamala Harris, Martha.
I mean, a lot of people looked at that and said he was going to prosecute. I think look, this is much more bureaucratic. It's about having somebody who, rules that a certain program or whatever can be.
It is much more bureaucratic. And not democratic. You understand that, right? There's a difference between those two.
legal, because a lot of that comes back to like how you interpret certain bureaucratic actions. The shutdown thing I just talked about was a good example. Trump used some legal maneuvers to make sure that he had executive authority to try and divert fundings toward a border wall. That's the way that I looked at it, especially with the whole Merrick Garland thing. I understand this whole prosecute political opponents and stuff, but I mean, Trump is the one who was indicted by the Biden administration. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know why it's supposed to be so scary to watch this clip. It seems entirely consistent with the view of what went wrong with the previous Trump administration.
Well, I think it's because of the things that Trump's been saying, which is, you know, he posted on Truth Social, when I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences so that the depravity of justice does not happen again. He added those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, and prosecuted at levels unfortunately never seen before in our country. So, you know, it's very convenient to just like sort of dismiss anything that he says that goes too far. But I don't think that you can fairly do that at this point, given what we saw after the last election. And so that's where the J.D. Vance comments come in, is like, okay, now you have not just Trump like mouthing off on Truth Social, you have J.D. Vance affirmatively saying, like, you know, the attorney general, who would be the person going after these people, locking them up or whatever, is the second most important person in government. You got Michael Flynn, who was a close associate, you know, talking about these things. And you've got Trump himself, you know, making multiple comments, not just the one that I just, that we played before, talked about before with regard to the National Guard and military. But he said he'd purge the government of non-loyalists. He said that there would be one really violent day when police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity. You know, he's talked about mass.
Like she lists that off and Saagar giggles. Because ultimately Saagar is supportive of the idea that we need a purge. We need a Kristallnacht like event to put drug dealers in their places. You know, like that's, he agrees with it.
Deportations that would be a quote bloody story, and it's very convenient to just dismiss all of the things that are like uncomfortable and embrace the ones that you happen to like, especially at this point. Again, maybe before January 6th and all the fake electors crap and, you know, the like actual plans that we know at this point were hatched and rejected to try to seize voting machines and all this stuff. But I just don't think you can hand wave it away at this point the way that
Crystal should absolutely have her own show, because, oh my God, watching her have to deal with this guy every single day is awful to imagine.
Previously, perhaps it would be
maybe.
reasonable
I mean,
to.
do I take it like very, very seriously? No. Look, maybe I'm naive. I believe mostly in the American system. If the Attorney General genuinely did try to bring, under Donald Trump, tried to have a grand jury in Washington, D.C., indict people for, for voter fraud based on Venezuelan dominion, I just simply believe that wouldn't happen, or it wouldn't go through the justice system, even if Trump wanted it to go through. So sure, the Attorney General can try. In terms of practice, like, well, how do I think he means it? What I just talked about in terms of legal opinion, making sure, let's make sure, for example, that we want to change the way that we take census data, that we do it properly. So
I don't like, if you want to imagine what a one violent day would look like you would just instantly see like the vast majority of rural towns turning into sundown locations for like gay or trans or basically anyone who's not white. Like it would be bad. We're looking at like a purge, or again, I think a more accurate comparison is Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass in Nazi Germany.
Just lacing up a friendo. BWA.
And Paladin, thank you for the gifted sub, The Nexus of Midnight, and also thank you for gifting Ms. Milena a sub. I really appreciate it.
Supreme Court doesn't strike us down and make sure that it goes down because of a legal error. Literally, by the way, that's what happened under the first Trump administration. So I think the system works mostly fine. In terms of what the opinion is or whatever, is there a risk, you know, for what you're talking about? Certainly. I guess I just think what those people mostly expressed here, it's like, how seriously are you really supposed to take it completely literally? In the way I just laid out, I don't think you can take it completely literally.
But like January 6th doesn't change your assessment of that at all.
Considering that the law has changed, no. I mean, or sorry, yeah, actually, yeah, because the law has changed so significantly. If you had asked me in the previous regime,
the law has, again, notice the two things he's like leaned on here: the law and the bureaucracy. And notice who currently controls the top of our legal system. It is a deeply conservative Supreme Court. Notice who has a plan to completely overhaul and take over the entire bureaucratic structure at the upper echelons of power. Conservatives, they have Project 2025. I have an entire playlist going over all of the training videos. And you know what they reiterate over and over and over again? They reiterate that your only job as a political appointee in a Trump administration is to do whatever Donald Trump tells you. There is no checks and balances here.
regime, I'd be like, yeah, I'm actually a lot
There
more
are no
worried.
checks and
But
balances.
because the law changed with the bipartisan Electoral Count Act, I'm like, not really. Not the way that it currently is. It's physically impossible for them to try and do what they did last time around.
You're just considering like the specifics of what happened last time around. If he's back as president of the United States and all of the powers that that entails, you know, he could cause a lot of trouble. There's a lot of things that he could do that wouldn't look exactly like January 6th. And I'm just arguing.
But he wouldn't do that because he'd be a two-term for president.
I'm just arguing.
Oh my God.
I'm not even talking specifically about like stealing the election again or whatever. My whole point is that I don't think at this point, given what we've seen from him, that you can just hand wave away as, oh, like he doesn't really mean it. Because in the past, we've seen him mean it. And we've seen him cause a lot of trouble based on following through on the, you know, over-the-top rhetoric that he's used in the past. So that's it. That's my whole point is that I don't think that it's fair or honest to just, you know, hand wave away anything that he says that is like,
I wouldn't hand wave it away,
over the top,
but some of the
overtly
things
I wouldn't hand wave it away, says man who's been giggling like a school child at mentions of various threats or promises of violence.
listed, for
Authoritarian,
example,
et cetera.
some of the things you listed, I'm like, that sounds pretty good. Purging the government of non-loyalists, that sounds great, actually. I think the president should be in charge, for example, of national security.
He says he wouldn't hire anyone who admits the 2020 election wasn't stolen. That's what he means by that.
Well, yeah, like this is a nonsensical, like, basically, guys, what I think happened here is that Saagar has gotten overly excited at the prospect of a fascist takeover of America. He has been thoroughly unmasked here and is now trying to be like, oh, well, no, actually, it's quite reasonable for me to be excited about this. And, you know, it's not that weird. It's not that weird to have this boner in this particular context. Yeah, he is basically narrowed down on the things that Donald Trump and the Republican Party already have a plan to control, or already do control.
That's what he means by loyalty, is you have to be willing to lie and say the election was stolen and do literally whatever I say, no matter how outrageous or fraudulent it ultimately is. He doesn't mean like you're going to stand by my tariff policy.
I mean, we have no evidence of that. He's not currently in power.
No, because he literally said, I won't hire anyone who admits the 20.
We don't have evidence of that. He said it. You just don't think that what he says matters, which is insane because he's the president.
2020 election wasn't stolen, so that's the evidence.
Well,
would be the president, I guess.
You're gonna have then we'll have a very, very small pool to choose from, and they're welcome to do that and pursue that policy if they want to. And they will be able to hire maybe like 5 people. Like, that's what I mean. Maybe if he really does that, then he's an idiot, and then people shouldn't vote for him. You can decide for yourself. That's what I'm saying. I'm giving my assessment of how I would look at it. Mass deportation, yeah, the libs are gonna fight tooth and nail. Every Catholic charity and all these people are gonna sue with some fake Hawaii judge to make it. So yeah, I support mass deportation. I want an attorney general that would make sure that that was legally executed.
Saagar, you do not possess a level of whiteness that would protect you from a mass deportation program. Like, I'm sorry, but the idea that the only people who would get rounded up in a mass deportation program are, well, you know, only people who may not be citizens. Like, the bar that a lot of conservative officers would use would just be, are you white? ICE deported U.S. citizens that only spoke English? Yeah! It is insane to me. What, again, and to reiterate, and I'll make myself big again to reiterate, the deportations that Donald Trump has suggested doing would involve the building of railroad infrastructure. It would involve the building of concentration camps. And at that point, we are basically recreating the conditions for an American Holocaust. And I'm not being hyperbolic about that. If you just take a moment to think, how do you go about suddenly dealing with an influx of 20 million people into the carceral state? And how do you separate them from the general population, because you're going to be sending them out of the country? We don't have the facilities to house 20 million people in detention until we can deport them. We don't have that. So that would require building that. We don't have the infrastructure to affordably move that number of people across the United States. So it would get very expensive very quickly unless you built infrastructure. And on top of that, then you get to the fiscal conservatives who are going to ask, well, wait, why? This is way too expensive. We need a cheaper solution. This is the framework that gets you to a Holocaust.
So it's one of those where what you think is radical, I think is actually necessary. And probably vice versa, too.
He'll use buses to transport people to the camps. I'm sure in the initial stages, but like, if you're talking about deporting millions of people, using buses is an incredibly expensive way of doing it.
In terms of what? Legalizing weed?
One violent day in which police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's not legal or even probably like
Calling
able to
out
be
the
declared.
military.
It's not, it's not legal, Saagar. That's the point. He's talking about doing blatantly illegal things with the power of his office.
Against your political opponents.
Again, I don't think that that's legal. It's never happened before. Let's think about when's the last time that it happened.
Saagar, I just think that there's a real double standard in the way that you analyze his words versus the words of, literally any Democratic politician.
I mean, I guess it just comes back to when we have
You don't believe him.
Yeah, I actually just don't believe it'll happen. No, I believe
you pick
he
out the
would do
ones
it
that
if he
you
could.
like, and you say those ones will happen. But the ones I don't like,
No.
I'm just gonna
I'll be honest
pretend
and
those
say
didn't happen.
that if he could do it, I think that he would. But I believe in the American system enough to say that most of the shit's not going to happen regardless.
Okay.
That's what I think. Okay. I think that if he could do it, he would. I also think Democrats would do a lot of the stuff if they would. They literally indicted Trump. I mean, they indicted him under January 6th.
Committed crimes.
Huh? I mean, again, that's a
He
pretty
committed crimes,
subjective way of looking at it. And I don't think it would be all that easy. I just think, first of all,
Oh man, Saagar is running rhetorically. Like, yeah, because he was indicted because they committed crimes. That's why they were indicted, Saagar.
well, that probably punctures a
They
little bit
also
of the
indicted
bubble.
Hunter Biden and Bob Menendez and Eric Adams. So
I mean, to Hunter Biden, it took, 5 years of crawling, to the bringing it into media story to actually get him charged. If he was any normal citizen, he would have been charged like a decade ago. So I don't think that's particularly a great example.
Bob Menendez, Eric Adams.
Bob Menendez was indicted previously, skipped the charge, and the only reason he got indicted is because he's so cartoonishly corrupt. Now, not saying it isn't a good thing. I support that. I think all corrupt people should be prosecuted. I'm trying to answer the question very honestly, which is, yeah, I think if he could do it, he would. But I don't think that he can with the American.
See, but that's the thing. That's the thing. You're saying the quiet part out loud. I think that if he could do it, he would. Meaning that you know he wants to be a fascist dictator, and you are putting him in that position of consolidated authority. And you're trying to say, well, just ignore that he's saying he wants to do all these things, and ignore that, like, hey, you know, he might be able to get away with it considering the powers the Supreme Court has granted him. You know, like, you just like that he's a dictator. That's it. The thing is, no, Alan Smith, Saagar is not dumb. Saagar is just a fascist. You know, like, Saagar is actually quite good at what he does, which is why he's been able to maintain this position on this show for years. For a long time, his job was, and probably to an extent still is, sane washing Donald Trump. But, like, it is grossly apparent in this that he is just fully on board with the fascist plan.
American system. That's pretty simple. I mean, if in a certain sense, that's what a lot of those people in the New York Times in the New York Times profile were saying too.
So you trust the institutions, bottom line.
Mostly. I mean, they've been stress tested by and large. Have there been some, like, slippage, I guess you could say? Yes, certainly. But if you look at it and the way that...
Yeah, but you know, if you're gonna say the guardrails of democracy have been tested in the past, but they've held this long, so why should we doubt it in the future? Keep in mind, if you continue hitting something, it's going to eventually break.
Most of this stuff, especially the most egregious, like if you wanted to call out, you know, the military to prosecute your political opponents, like, you have to really think about how the level of chain of command and number of people who would have to go along with that to actually happen. Now, would he do that if he wanted to? Maybe he would. I don't know. But it's one of those where if you look also at the type of people who are in charge of the military, you have his old chief of staff, General Mark Milley, being like, I think he's a fascist. So, like, do you think that the person who...
No, he didn't just say that he thinks Trump is a fascist. He said he thinks Trump is a total fascist, as in there's no other way to really interpret what he is doing other than him being a fascist. And he also listed him as one of the greatest threats, existential threats, to America.
Replaced him, who's basically, you know, a clone, would he execute an order like that? I mean, I don't really think so.
So if Kamala Harris came out and said, I'm going to potentially use the military to go after my political opponents, or the military should go after my political opponents, you'd be like,
my bones are chilling. Do you have any faith in the American people to act in their best interests? I mean, I can only tell you what I have the numbers for, and what it looks like right now is that the polling is really suspect, and even with that suspect polling that is leaning heavily conservative, Kamala Harris is up by anywhere from 1 to 5 points. And the vast majority of the polls that have been released recently were conducted by Republican polling outfits. We don't have access to the internals, internal polling that campaigns do. But, and Donald Trump is, for all intents and purposes, flailing on the campaign trail. You know, he's talking, the scuttlebutt that's been reported all day is that he's old and tired and effectively too weak to do interviews. So I'm leaning towards Kamala Harris winning. But it's also much closer than it should be, given the circumstances. So, like, while I think Kamala Harris could win, you know, there's like a 25-30% chance that she doesn't. And you know what? That's a terrible place to be. You know? That's a terrible place to be. You don't want to like take a 25% risk that you're going to die. That's terrible odds. And so, like, you can't get complacent. We still need people to do door knocking for their local campaigns. We need people to phone bank for their local campaigns. We need people to go out there and volunteer. Take a weekend between now and the election day, get your friends together, and knock on doors for your local Democratic campaign. Or join Progressive Victory, folks. Join Progressive Victory and get involved, phone banking, door knocking, etc.
The system will allow it.
Oh, no, I would be like, yeah, I think that's kind of crazy. I also don't think that it would happen. I mean, don't you think that that's like a rational response? Like, again, like,
Yeah,
do
but
we
I
think
just-
that the
my
military would
point
obey
is,
that order?
I don't think that
Yeah.
you would be as sanguine about it if it was from a politician like Kamala Harris or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or whoever. I don't think you would just be like, oh, the system on hold, so whatever, it's fine.
I wouldn't say whatever. I think a lot of this is baked in with Trump. And this is also, look, I mean, this is a difficult position, right?
It is baked in with Trump, that is true.
Americans are stuck in a two-party system. It's very difficult. What are we supposed to do? I mean, you're in a scenario where if you disagree with somebody on 40%, but you agree on 60, you should probably vote for the 60. I didn't design the system. I think it's bad.
I mean, like, if we take a look at 538's recent polling, like, Harris up 2, Harris up 3, Harris up 12, Harris up 15 points. Harris up 2, Harris up 1. Here, you have to go back to October 9th through the 17th. So last week, Activote got a Trump +2. And we also are looking at RMG Research, Trump +5. But again, the vast majority of the polling is indicating, like, Kamala Harris is leaning towards a victory. But again, these are not landslide numbers. And so please continue going out, knocking on doors and phone banking, because democracy might very well depend on it.
One of those two where you have to really weigh a lot of checks and balances about things that you maybe do very, very viciously object to, or even think about, and then think about what the overall direction of the ship or whatever is going to point when they have their hands on the steering.
She's still up nationally and in swing states. Yeah, but also I wasn't looking at state polling. State polling was thrown in there, but like, again, that's just all the polling related to the presidents that I was going through. But yeah, if you look at the national polls, again, she's up by 2 points. That's not a great position for her to be in, guys.
Steering wheel. I don't think it's good. You know, I don't think most people want to be in this position, but they are in this position, right? And so when you think about this attorney general stuff, you have to weigh it for what you think is important, in which way that you think it will go, and then on balance with all the other things that combine with the federal government. So do I think this is a great thing? No, I don't necessarily. But I mean, I'm sure it's forever. There's a lot of liberals who watch our show who are outraged about Gaza. I mean, you should be honest and know that Trump will probably empower Israel to do even more than what you want. So, you know, honestly, if I were you, I would vote for Kamala if that was your #1 issue. I would vote for Kamala. I will tell you that right now. That's kind of hypocritical in some ways, but in a real politic way, that's what you should do. That's how most people have to assess their voting. That's how you should assess.
How would I have felt if Mitt Romney had won in 2012? Bad. Mitt Romney's not a good guy.
On all things,
but that's
right?
not really my point. My point is just, we, you know, at this show, we try to put, we obviously both have different lenses and different, you know, partisan inclinations and ideologies, but we try to put the principles and the facts first. And I just think if you're going to analyze, you know, a statement like, I'm going to call out the military against my political opponents, I think that should be analyzed in the same way, whether it comes from a Kamala Harris or whether it comes from a Donald Trump.
I agree.
Regardless of who you happen to prefer for the election.
Totally. I mean, in terms of, like I said, I think it's kind of crazy. I think he would do it if he could. I think that's bad. I mean, but it's also, do I think it would happen? Probably not. I think probably the same with Kamala if she tried to do so. Although, I don't know. I have to think about that one too, in terms of the way the military and how that would be executed. That would be my response. And I think how a lot of people look at it.
I will say, just looking at their projected electoral map, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Kamala Harris either wins Pennsylvania. I think that she can win. I think she can win Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and since the kerfuffle with the Republican governor candidate, I think she has a shot at winning North Carolina. Michigan is the only one I feel like pretty big toss-up energy about, just because of how she may have torpedoed her campaign here. But, well, we can talk more in depth about that on a new day.
For Democratic overreach, where they're like, well, in general, I trust the institutions. I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing, but this is who the person that I would choose to prefer to be in charge of the country. That's how a lot of...
There is no comparable election to this one, Super Jet Guy, unfortunately. She has to win those 3 Rust Belt states, and I think she will. I mean, I hope so. Hope you're right. I just really would prefer to not be going into the election on hope and instead looking at this and being like, yes, a solid Kamala win. That would be nice.
Rationalization, all this works. And for a lot of people who watch the show, they find that really, really difficult. And I agree. I also find it very, very difficult. I think 99% of people
It's possible she gets Georgia, but I'm not going to put my ducks in that basket.
Are stuck in a system they don't know.
I'm slightly concerned. Should I be concerned? Yeah, you should. You should be concerned. And you know what? You should go out and channel that concern into knocking on doors for a political campaign and phone banking. Getting out the vote is really important, and when you volunteer, and you can do that, by the way, through Progressive Victory, progress.win. Just type that into your URL, and it should bring you to the volunteer page. Sign up, volunteer, join the Discord. You can get trained up in like a single night, and you can make a ton of calls that can actually turn out a ton of people to vote. So you guys can literally make the difference. There are 330 people here. If you guys dedicated one weekend between now and Election Day, you guys potentially could turn out like thousands of people who might not otherwise have voted. That is conceivable.
Necessarily want to have to grapple with all of these questions, but it was the reality that was presented to us. And as much as I love, one thing I do love is to talk to Jill Stein, because it's one of those where, look, I don't agree with her on a lot.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that this fascist weasel loves talking to Jill Stein. Oddly enough, a lot of fascist weasels seem to really love talking to Jill Stein.
But I love her optimism and her theory about breaking all this, power and all this. But I haven't seen any real evidence of it. I thought RFK was one of the last people who could do it, but he decided to drop out and to endorse Trump. Yeah. So in a way, he actually validated everything that I'm saying here, which is, RFK has so many of the same criticisms probably that you just laid out about the attorney general, about why Trump was unfit and all of that. But he's like, but I think he'll stick with me on my Maha policy. And that's enough for me to come out and be like, yeah, you should vote Trump. And you should just have to reconcile yourself with that.
There's a lot going on with RFK Jr. Democrats. I won't get into that one.
Okay, fine.
All right, let's talk about the Trump assassination.
Sure.
Let's move on to
let's get to it.
The theoretical assassination.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the...
No one liked that video. God. Saagar went full fascist in that debate. And honestly, props to Crystal. I think she did really, really well exposing just how completely ideologically bankrupt he is as a co-host. I genuinely, I think she did a great job there. No notes. Best performance I think I've seen from her to date in these kind of back and forth conversations with Saagar. She's definitely improved, and I love to see it. You love to see it, folks. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons, hit the like button, do the things. And I'll see you next time.